If the community transmission, if infection rates over these 2 weeks remain low and stable, then we will decide by the middle of June on whether we want to take the next step to move to phase 2. And that means that phase 2 could happen before the end of June.
Good evening, you're watching a special edition of The Big Story. I'm Haryanto Diman, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. The second phase of Singapore's reopening post-circuit breaker could happen before the end of June. But the multi-ministry task force said today that this is dependent on whether the local COVID-19 cases continue to remain low. National Development Minister and Task Force Co-Chair Lawrence Wong added that Phase 2 would see the resumption of a wider range of activities, with almost the entire economy resuming operations by the start of this phase. Now, these include the reopening of retail shops and restarting consumer services. Dining in at F&B outlets would also be allowed, but would be capped at 5 people per group. Sports facilities and public venues like stadiums and swimming pools are also expected to reopen. Social interactions and family visits would be allowed, subject to the same cap of 5 people. The task force said a more cautious approach will need to be taken for activities in higher risk settings, such as those with large gatherings or close contact in enclosed spaces. These include museums, libraries, cinemas, theatres, bars, clubs, and parks.
All of these venues and settings, based on our experience and overseas experience, have been instances where there have been cases of transmission in such settings. And so we want to take a more cautious approach for activities in these areas to resume. So what we will do is we will begin conversations and discussions with businesses and organizations across these different settings on the safeguards and safe management measures that will be needed. And subject to these measures being in place, we will then discuss with the entities on the precise timing of when they can resume activities within Phase 2. So they may not all resume at the start of Phase 2, but if they have the safeguards and precautions in place, they could resume later, but still within Phase 2.
Minister Wong also said Singapore is in talks to set up travel bubbles with countries where the virus is under control. These will be allowed for essential travel, not leisure, with clear protocols in place, including the testing of local and foreign travellers.
We will announce more details on any particular country for which we have reached agreement. This will allow essential travel to resume, and particularly for businesses that are based here in Singapore, where their staff and employees need to have some travel around the region. I think this is going to be an important measure that will allow not only business to resume, but jobs to continue. And we can then ensure that Singaporeans can continue to work, not just in Singapore, but in places where they need to travel for work. Having these arrangements does not mean that we will allow mass market travel. That will take a bit longer. So the arrangements I've just described refers to essential travel, subject to all the arrangements and safeguards as I've just described, and the travel bubble that we would work out with respective countries. It's not for mass market travel, which I think will take a lot longer to resume, not just in Singapore, but also internationally. If we're talking about essential travel for work, and we think that's important for the economy, for businesses, but importantly to protect jobs for Singaporeans. Because if the business says, look, my people cannot move around, then I might sort of relocate to another country. Then jobs will be lost. So we are focused on essential travel for work reasons, and we will limit the numbers. Even under a green lane arrangement, the numbers will be limited. Right? So there will be quotas set, and then we will have to prioritize who can travel for such reasons.
Yet as Singapore gradually reopens, Minister Wong emphasized the need for Singaporeans to not lose sight of the objective and to adhere to the personal measures that have helped keep community transmissions low.
With more activities, the likelihood of transmission rises, and we have to be prepared that there will be more cases. So it's all the more important for us to stay vigilant, to be socially responsible, and to do all the necessary things that each individual has to do. Do not just rely on government measures or government rules. All of us have to do our part as individuals, uphold high standards of personal hygiene, wear a mask when we are out, and see a doctor if we are ill, all these basic precautions that we have been talking about since the start of the outbreak.
Meanwhile, Health Minister Gan Kim Yong said Singapore's discharged criteria will change with immediate effect. All coronavirus patients who are assessed to be clinically well and no longer infectious by day 21 of their illness will be discharged without having to undergo further tests. A local study revealed by the National Centre for Infectious Diseases and the Academy of Medicine's Chapter of Infectious Diseases Physicians has shown that while patients may continue to test positive for some time, the virus is no longer viable after 11 days of a person getting sick and cannot be spread to others.
The World Health Organization has also published on 27th of May its recommendation to shift from transmission-based to a time-based discharge, and patients who are clinically well can now be discharged from after 10 days from the onset of illness, plus at least 3 days without respiratory symptoms or fever. The task force will therefore revise the discharge criteria for COVID-19 patients in Singapore. With immediate effect, all COVID-19 patients who are assessed to be clinically well by day 21 of onset of illness can be discharged without the need for further PCR tests. As an added precaution, they will be required to remain at home or dormitories for a further 7 days to rest and recover. After day 28, these recovered individuals can return to work. This revised approach will allow recovered patients who are well and no longer infectious to return to the community in a timely manner.
Previously, patients had needed 2 negative swab tests 24 hours apart in order to be discharged, even if they had not been sick for some time. All the details brought up in the press conference are on straitstimes.com. You can watch the full press conference on the Straits Times YouTube channel. And just a quick program note, we have a special edition of The Big Story at 5:30 p.m. tomorrow. Senior health correspondent Salma Khalik is joined by a panel of experts to look ahead to the 3 phases of recovery for Singapore. They'll discuss what we can expect in the coming weeks and months, as well as the potential pain points and pitfalls that could delay a new normal. Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman and I leave you with a word of caution by Minister Gan as we aim to start Phase 2 in end June.
In order for us to get there, it is important for us to bear in mind not to have big parties and big celebrations as we open Phase 1 from 2nd of June. I think if we start with a big bang party, we are going to get into trouble.